And welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to another edition of the Top 12 Podcast. As I'm adjusting my chair, I'm Harris Sereno, alongside my co-host Dan Kiley. Back with episode 121 of the Top 12 Podcast. Dan, I know you've been with us for a solid, I don't know, we approaching 50 episodes at this point. I think
way more than that. I think
way more than that.
I think I joined at like episode 40 something.
40 something, yeah. So we've been here for a long time, and we're gonna be here for a lot longer. Ladies and gentlemen, we have a somewhat loaded edition of the Top Podcast. I was in attendance for the Kirby Smart press conference, my first Kirby Smart press conference. I was there in attendance. I have a few points that I want to touch on that, but we're getting to that later on in the show. I have a big question for Dan about Kirby Smart and that in that press conference. But first, let's hit hot topics. Dan, topical hot topics, considering that it is the Olympics. The Olympics just passed. We had the closing ceremony on Sunday. So, Dan, question number one. What is your favorite Olympic sport, not including basketball, because that's the easy answer?
So this was tough for me. Now, all right, so let me put this in context. So my answer is going to be kind of different. My wife doesn't watch anything with me. She doesn't watch sometimes she'll watch most of a Georgia game. If it's a really big Georgia game, she'll watch the entire thing. But typically she doesn't watch anything with me. So the one thing that she will watch is the Olympics. And the one thing that we always kind of gravitate to is gymnastics. But then this past Olympic, we really got into the synchronized diving. And listen, I know it sounds crazy, but that was so much fun to watch, was the synchronized diving. Like, I have no idea what the scoring is. And I don't know if a big splash is a penalty. I have no idea. But we were mesmerized by how two people could jump off, do flips sideways, kick the legs in all sorts of different directions, and do it in sync. It was just incredible. I would say overarching, Harrison, my absolute favorite Olympic thing to watch is curling, which is the Winter Olympics. But I don't know. It would have been gymnastics, but we just absolutely fell for the synchronized diving. It was so cool.
I watched the synchronized diving, and I'm going to go along the same lines as you here. I actually have a tie, so I don't want to cheat here. But I'm narrowing it down. Ping pong and swimming, like their little relays. I don't know what it was, but the first day of the Olympics, there was nothing more relaxing than just sitting back and watching the relays. I loved it. But ping pong in particular, I think it was South Korea and China. Some of the most entertaining ping pong match you'll ever see. I mean, those guys are full on. It feels like one of those guys, when he go back to hit the ball, it's like he could touch the ground with the back of his hand. Like he could fall back and touch the ground because he was leaning so far back to hit the ball, never hit it off the other end of the table. Dan, I don't know about you. Not only is my hand-eye coordination not great enough to play ping pong, but I'd want to smack the crap out of that ball. And I would probably end up gifting my opponent so many points trying to play ping pong.
Here's the question. How long until oh gosh, my brain just went blank. It's the thing that replaced tennis. The thing that everybody's playing. Pickleball. How long until the pickleball's in the Olympics? Next turn?
2028. I could see it. I
mean, everybody's playing it.
Yeah, I mean, the U.S. is bringing flag football into the Olympics in 2028. So is it really that out of the question that we could get some pickleball? I think if it's not 2028, it could be the Olympics right afterward. Then again, it's like, man, what a non-U.S. hosted Olympics, bring that in to the sport or bring that into the events. I'd be down for it, Dan, but you're going to have a hard time finding me anything as entertaining as some good ping pong. I tell you what, if I could do it, I would play it. It's fun. It looks fun for sure. Dan, let's transition right back into. We're not done with this Olympic kind of theme here. We got a little blind draft. That's not really a blind draft because Dan knows it's coming, and we'll get to that here later. But Dan, we have Chris Doering's top 10 SEC receivers of the last decade. So dating back to 2014, he dropped his top 10 list, and I have it here in full in the show notes for you. From 1 through 10, I will just go right smack down the list. It was Devontae Smith, Jamar Chase, Amari Cooper, Justin Jefferson, A.J. Brown, Elijah Moore, Jared Jeudy, Malik Neighbors, Calvin Ridley, and Ladd McConkey. Now, the inclusion of Ladd McConkey was very controversial for non-Georgia fans. I saw Tennessee fans saying earlier in the week that Hyatt should be up there. Hyatt had an incredible season. It's hard to deny that. I saw people talking about Jalen Waddle. Jalen Waddle was dominant. So I decided, Dan, since there's so much debate, and we talked about it here today on the phone when you proposed the idea, how about we just give our own top 10? So, Dan, I don't know if you want to go first. You want me to go first? I got my top 10 list right here. It's not very different. The top guys are pretty much the same. And I include many of the same guys, but I got a few alterations, if you will, kind of at the end.
All right, go for it.
All right. Starting at number 1, Devontae Smith. And Dan, I think I know when we talked earlier, you said Justin Jefferson, Jamar Chase. If you correct me if I'm wrong, you would probably list one of those two number 1. The reason I didn't here is because Devontae Smith had one of the best seasons, if not the best season of a college football receiver of all time. That Heisman winning season is special. I get it. It's COVID. Everyone's going to say it's COVID, and that season sucked. I mean, you look back on that season now, you're like, man, how did we live through that? But we did. But despite that, despite all of that, Devontae Smith has a hell of a story, had a hell of a season on a really loaded Bama team. And I mean, shoot, you watch him play in the NFL now, it translates. You go back and watch in 2020, he's playing with Mac Jones, who's the backup to Trevor Lawrence. Who would have thought that back in 2020? I mean, it just makes the season all the more special. Number 2, I'm going to get a little bit quicker on this because I want Dan to get his in. Jamar Chase, not much to be said. He was the best receiver on that 2019 LSU team. He's number 2 for me. Justin Jefferson, if we were talking NFL success, taking that into consideration, this man would probably be number 1 on this list. Then I go Amari Cooper, A.J. Brown, and here's my first inclusion that Doring didn't have. And when I was looking over some of the top SEC receivers of all time in terms of stats, I'm surprised he left him off. Mike Evans. Mike Evans played with, Johnny Manziel, Mr. Johnny Football. And I think you can make an argument that Mike Evans has had a better NFL career. And I think that's, not even an argument. I think that
he was unstoppable in college, bro. You're right on the money. Just keep rolling.
Yeah, we're good. Malik Neighbors, number 7. Not much to be said there. Calvin Ridley, man, that guy was a beast. I did George Pickens instead of Ladd McConkey at number 9. I think obviously he had a great career. He had a good career at Georgia. Maybe not a great career, but that's not his fault. NFL, he translates into the NFL. We knew he was going to be a beast, and that's what he is. Number 10, Jared Jeudy. I was torn here between Jeudy and Waddle. Waddle has that elite speed, that elite trait, which I wanted to lean toward to, but Jeudy just had the production that Waddle really didn't have. Jeudy had the consistent production. I think he had over 1,000 yards at least once. Waddle never did. So I put Jerry Jeudy at number 10.
All right. So like you added all those names, and I think you could go right down that list and your list would be just fine. But, the inclusion of Ladd McConkey, and this is not a slight at Ladd McConkey. He's a hell of a wide receiver. The problem is that the SEC has been loaded wide receivers. Now, you did something that is different, is you went 2014 and 2024. We hadn't had the 24 season yet. We had 2023. So if you go back to 13, there's a name that you left off the list if you include the 2013 season, and that's a guy named Julio Jones. And he's 100% on my list. So I got Julio Jones on my list over somebody like Ladd McConkey. Now, if you want to talk about a guy who's still in school, a guy named Luther Burden, like that guy is incredible. And if you're talking about maybe just one season that popped, Jamison Williams, the one that was at Alabama, incredible season. And then you have a guy named Alshon Jeffrey, who nobody ever thinks about, nobody ever gives credit. Alshon Jeffrey had one of the best years in college that we've seen in a long, long time. Of course, Donson Smith had probably the absolute best wide receiver season. I'm not going to go through my list. I'm not going to do it that way. I'm just saying this list came together. It's a fairly good list. I don't have a lot of objections to it, although adding Ladd McConkey is what the lightning rod was, and we knew this is something that you and I have talked about ad nauseum, and we've talked about it a million different times. When people do lists, everybody loves a good list, right? And by God, we're talking about it, and that's exactly what he wants. But how do you get people talking about your list? You add a lightning rod. and Ladd McConkey was the lightning rod. And obviously, it was either a player or somebody who covers Missouri up in Missouri had an absolute conniption fit that Ladd McConkey was on this list. I think your list was very well thought out. I thought you had some really good players on it. Like I said, if you go back to 2013, which is the way the list was conceived, I got to put Julio on there.
Absolutely.
Man, it was incredible. But then in that case, you also have to put a guy named AJ Green on that list because he graduated. He came out the same year. There's just a lot of really, and again, it always seems like in order to do a list like this, you have to disrespect somebody. And I don't want that to be the case because we both love Ladd. We think he's an incredible wide receiver. The problem is when you're talking about the last 10 years of the SEC, you've had a major paradigm shift where the game has gone vertical with wide receivers, and the SEC goes out and gets the best of everything. So they have been littered. I mean, you could give me a list of 25 names, Harrison, and you could make an argument for every one of those 25 to be in the top 10, right? I mean, just think about the guys that I was just talking about. Alshon Jeffrey, like I know you don't have him on your list, but the guy had a hell of a year, right? Or a career. Mike Evans, 100%. You said he wasn't on the original list. I don't know how that happens. And then a guy like Burden is 100% going to be on that list at some point. So I think your list is really good, and I hope I added some context. I didn't want to just repeat all the same names that you said. So I was just trying to add some guys that would be up for consideration.
I think, I mean, even this gets even harder if you go back, to this century, because then you do have guys like you said, Julio Jones, Alshon Jeffrey, Terrence Edwards. I don't know where you would rank Terrence Edwards in the conversation of greatest SEC receivers of all time. I think he's probably top 30 at the least.
Can I tell you who ESPN had in the top 15 for their top wide receivers the last 10 years?
Go ahead.
Right at number 15?
Huh?
Malcolm Mitchell.
Ooh.
They had Malcolm Mitchell at number 15 the last 10 years.
Interesting. I did not know that.
But that was based on statistical. It wasn't in theory who the best player was. It's it was the top 25 best seasons in the last 10 years.
See, when I made my list, I looked at the stats and looked at their careers, but man, simply to me, it was like, okay, if I'm picking receivers based on college alone, forgetting their NFL career, who am I going first? It's Devontae Smith, it's Jamar Chase, and it's Justin Jefferson. That's my top three because Jamar Chase was better than Justin Jefferson in college. Not a stretch to say. Justin Jefferson was incredible, but Jamar Chase was the guy at LSU. Devontae Smith, legendary. That's how I would pick it. And hey, the thing about lists, which as Dan says, makes them controversial in some sense, is they're all subjective.
But I forgot to mention this one. So do you know who the number one wide receiver the last 15 or last 10 years is? Statistically, the number one receiver the last 15 years. He's not on your list. He's not on the other list. He's not on any list. You probably don't even know his name.
Jordan Matthews.
100%. It's Jordan. That's a hell of a pull by you.
Let's go. I was looking at the stat sheet earlier.
Cooper was number 2.
I was looking at that earlier. I was trying to think of who was on that list, and it was, Jordan Matthews. Damn. And he didn't even have the NFL career you thought he would.
3,760 yards, 3,760 yards, 24 touchdowns, 261 receptions, and he only played in 43 games.
Damn.
Yeah.
He barely played over. I mean, he played just 3 years.
And then there's a name that you don't know, Brian Edwards.
South Carolina.
He's number 3. Yeah, I didn't know
South
if you knew that.
That was 19 team. He was on the team that beat Georgia in 19.
Christian Kirk.
I remember. I forgot about Christian Kirk.
Number 5. He was on the same team as Evans.
Damn.
Josh Reynolds.
Lions. I think he's on the Lions or was on
Texas
the Lions.
A&M.
Didn't know he was on A&M.
He had 30 touchdowns. All the names that Fred Ross. Fred Ross paid the cost, be the boss. Fred Ross. He had 2,800 yards and 22 touchdowns. He played for Mississippi State.
Would not even ever have guessed Mississippi State.
This is the top 10. And then number 10 is Colby Hamilton.
Doesn't ring a bell.
Arkansas wide receiver had 2,500 yards, 15 touchdowns on 156 receptions.
All right, I see you, Arkansas.
Yeah. And there's a bunch of names after the top 10 that I had no idea who they were, but there was 4 names in the top 10 that I didn't know who they were. I knew who
was looking
Jordan Matthew was. I just forgot him.
I was looking at the list earlier, and I think the most surprising name I'd never heard of. Well, I got two, and this wouldn't be here for the last 15 years. Craig Yeast. Don't know who you are. You played at Kentucky. Apparently had a really great career. 13th all time SEC receiving yards. The next one, Vanderbilt. Vanderbilt has two guys in the top 20,
Wait. Before you tell me the Vanderbilt, I will tell you who it is. I can tell you who it is. His name is Gerald Boo Mitchell, and he is the president of the GFL, and I see him every week.
This guy's a little bit below Boo. Boo's number 10. I didn't know who Boo was before. I can admit that. Earl Bennett. Played in 2007. Never heard of him. But hey, you were right. You were just 10 spots up from where Earl Bennett was. Boo Mitchell's at number 10.
Yeah, Boo Mitchell was when he left Vanderbilt, he was the number 1 all-time leading receiver in SEC history.
Damn. Hey,
folks, go look at that list. Every number is in front, like younger than him.
Yeah. Yo, folks, if you want more of this, ESPN dropped a quarterback one. Speaking of lightning rods, the only time I've heard Dan use lightning rod on this show, I have it clipped. It was like from it was July of 22. We were heading into the 22 season, July 22, after the first title. Dan said, and I quote, the lightning rod, end quote. And it was about Stetson Bennett. So hearing Ladd McConkey be a lightning rod, kind of crazy considering the past context of that term that Dan just used. But hey, for that list, he certainly was the lightning rod. A lot of people were upset with that one.
I said we just got 15 minutes out of it.
Yeah. We'll come back with the quarterback one because they had Jake Fromm over Mac Jones and Stetson Bennett over Mac Jones.
We can riff on that next week.
Yeah, we can get on that one next week. Dan, let's talk the press conference. I don't know if you were able to see it today, but I know we talked about it.
Listen, let me set the stage for this one. My boy Harrison had the opportunity to attend the UGA press conference. He was there in person, and he's going to go solo, and he's going to tell you what he heard today at the UGA press conference. Go, big dog.
We'll solo it. I'm going to do what Dan hates to do, so I'll solo screen, and I'll let Dan chill for a second. All right, so I got two quotes, and I know the headline here for us prompts concern, or I think even in the YouTube title, it'd be major concern. It could be a little bit clickbait, maybe, but it's up for your interpretation. I hope I put the question mark because it is up for your interpretation. And I'm going to ask Dan that question at the end of this quote mini rant that we're going to go on. Kirby Smart, right when he walked in the room, folks, if you go back and watch it, you can kind of tell what mood he's in. You can kind of always tell when you watch it. I think Dan has had this conversation with me. Dan's called me before and says, was it just me or was Kirby in a bad mood? You can kind of tell within the first 5 minutes of a press conference, you know what Kirby Smart you're going to get. That's not to say that he's not always kind of, I don't know what the word is, maybe not testy of sort because he doesn't really get into it with people, but you can tell whether or not he's going to be upfront with you, maybe even crack a joke because he's so comfortable. Today was not one of those days. If you want to know how this press conference went, Mark Weiser asked him a question. Have you identified certain spots that are, this is not, and I quote, certain spots where depth is a concern? He said yes. Mark Weiser says, can you tell us? He said no. 2 words as the answer to the question. But here, his 2 concerns, Dan. He talked at the very beginning, talked about the scrimmage, said the progress of the team was coming along well, but the team lacked enthusiasm, lacked effort, wasn't running to the ball, wasn't trying to knock the ball out. Just some of the issues that he saw with the first scrimmage. Then he went on to talk about his depth. And this is why I think some people may be hitting that alarm bell of, holy crap, are we overestimating Georgia this season? Kirby Smart said, and I quote, on the depth of his football team, we've got a long way to go as a football team. We are nowhere near or even close to where we need to be. I feel like we have less depth than we've ever had. That's kind of a common theme talking to other coaches I talk to. I call it the deterioration of football because every year we've been here, we've had less. That is what Kirby Smart said about the depth of this football team. And what is the one thing that we talk about for the last, I think, 2 years we've done this show is that Georgia has a more deeper roster, talented roster than everybody else. And it's interesting to hear him come out and say this, Dan, because when you think about it, what's the reason that a lot of us are predicting Georgia to go on and win the national championship, to kind of run the gauntlet of sorts of their schedule and win their third, is because of that depth. But right now, Kirby Smart says he hasn't seen it. Now, here's my question, and this is where it gets interesting for me. When he says depth, is he talking about lack of experience in terms of depth, or is he talking about guys just not being talented enough to help them? That there's a huge difference. Every year, it feels like there's always those positions. Cornerback, for example, this year, there's not a ton of experience in terms of depth. I think the most experienced guys we have at corner, or the most experienced guy that Georgia has at corner is Dalen Everett. After him, man, you look at the games played, the snaps played, it drops down a cliff. Then later, speaking a little bit more about his depth, he did admit, he said, and I quote, "There's a good nucleus of guys that have played a lot of football when you count Arian Smith, Dylan Bell, Oscar Delp, and Dom and those guys. But there is not the depth around Carson at the skills positions that have been there in the past." Dan, my question, and this is the big question that I think everybody has coming out of this press conference, is this just the typical Kirby Smart mannerisms to, trying to inspire his football team, or is this an actual concern heading into the season?
Can I say both?
Yeah, go ahead.
I think both, and let me tell you why. I believe there are certain areas on this football team where they are one injury away from not being as successful as they want to be. One of them would be center. It's extremely difficult to replace a center, especially one that was as talented as SVP. Georgia has been blessed the last couple rotations to have great play out of the center spot. You can go back to when Georgia wasn't successful, one of the main areas that you can point to is maybe they weren't getting extremely high-end play from the center. And I know that a lot of people hear that and they dismiss it, but the center is a very, very vital position in the football game. I mean, it just is. They're the quarterback of the offensive line. They're responsible for so much. And if you get quality, just high-end play out of that position, it makes everything fall in line much quicker, right? So I believe you said that Wilson has been out, and he was the guy tagged as the starting center this year, which kind of shakes things up, moves people around. I'm not going to say who's playing where. I'm not that smart, and I've not been to one practice, okay? So what I will tell you is that not having a great center is a problem. It can be a problem. And then there are certain other areas where they're not very deep. Like I think you could say across the offensive line, that front five is probably as good as there is anywhere else in the country. However, when you start looking at the backups, while they're extremely talented, they're unproven. And I think that makes a coach nervous, okay? Outside of the wide receivers, there should be plenty. There should be plenty. But not a lot of them have played football for Kirby Smart. And that makes him a little nervous, I'm sure. On the defense, we're kind of thin in some positions where the talent is there, the experience is not there, right? So there's real reason to be nervous. The second part of that, where I say both, is because we are at the part of the camp where it's hot as hell outside and it's tough. And not everybody wants to be, at their very, very best every single day, right? And one of Kirby's mantras from the time he's got there, and I'm obviously, this isn't like on a t-shirt or anything, but it's compete. It's compete. Every day, compete. And, iron sharpens iron, that type of thing, where they beat on each other. They beat on each other every day. And it takes a
Bloody
special
Tuesday, baby.
Yeah, but it takes a special type of player to be able to do that every single day. And Nick Saban has talked about it in the past that when a team shows up and they're willing to compete at that level, they ultimately have great success, right? Well, if when Alabama kind of took a dip there for a little bit, Saban would always say his players, "You hadn't done shit yet," and that's exactly how he put it. You hadn't done shit. The guys before you, they did. That's their national championship. That's not yours. You may be here, you may have a ring, but you didn't earn it. You're not the guy. And I think we're starting to roll into that. It's starting to be that time at Georgia where the novelty of being the new kid on the block, the new elite, is kind of starting to wear off, and now it's kind of you're starting to get that mindset where they just think they're going to be good if they go out there and play. And that's the coach's biggest fear, right? So that's why I say it's both, because he probably senses a little bit of that, a little comeuppance, where the guys are thinking they've kind of arrived and he wants them to work a little bit harder. So I think there's that part of it. And then there's also that part where, they probably are a little bit thinner in some areas. But listen, when you graduate the number of players that Georgia has graduated to the NFL, it's bound to happen at some point.
Absolutely. Not even just the NFL. They're losing dang near 20 guys off their roster each year with the portal. I'll have to go back and research to get the exact number of what they're losing to the portal. But after the 21 championship, I believe the number was up in the 20s in terms of how many people left that roster. I mean, I remember off the top of my head, coming off the 2022 championship, a guy like Jaheim Singletary, 5-star corner coming out of, that went into Georgia, transferred out. I think he's at Arkansas now. It's just, yeah, like you said. And that was a question posed to Kirby, Dan, was how much is this deterioration of football and this deterioration of depth transfer portal base? And he didn't really have an answer because nobody actually knows why this is. There's a number of different reasons that this could be. One of the ones that he pointed out was maybe youth football is not being as popular. Maybe high school football. Something's happening that is leading to this problem of, hey, we don't have enough guys to play winning football.
I can back that up because, I think everybody who watches this show knows that I'm involved with Mill Creek football. Well, at the youth level, not many years ago, prior to COVID, in each age group, we had minimum of 2, but maximum of 4 teams per age group, just at Mill Creek. We had probably over 500 kids playing youth football in our association, which is obviously the biggest in Georgia. And now we're down to I don't know, maybe low 300s, high 200s. It's dropped by over 200 kids. Well, hell, we might be in the mid 200s. I'm not exactly sure where our numbers are right now, but we have 1 team per age group. That's it. Just 1 team per age group. Well, the 10-year-olds, we have 2 teams, but outside of that, and that's just the way. Obviously you have teams like Buford who has everybody wants to play Buford now. So they got 2 and 3 teams at every age group because they've got half of our kids, half of North's kids, half of everybody else's kids, and all the other kids they recruit. And I don't care if you're a Buford fan. I don't care. You do. So whatever.
I love how the excitement in your voice just totally drained. Just
it's because they shouldn't be allowed to play Gwinnett anything. They're playing at a whole different level. They don't have any rules to follow. They can do whatever they want to. So, hey, but listen, if you look at their complex and their facilities, why wouldn't you want to play there?
Hey, they call it Buford University for a reason.
Have you ever seen their school?
I drove past it. I've not been on campus. I've driven past it. It looks like a college. It looks like a college.
All bullshit aside, that place is phenomenal. Their facilities are phenomenal. Their weight room is nicer than Georgia's. They got building a brand new $54 million football stadium right across the street from the school. It's going to be absolutely insane. The entire end zone is going to be suites. Their basketball is a coliseum. It holds over 5,000 people for a basketball stadium. God. The damn thing is incredible. Everything they got is, I'm not hating. I'm just telling you that thing is friggin' gorgeous. I get it. I get why people go there.
100%. Oh, absolutely. It's, they put a lot of money into it and they're producing the results there. Dan, I think for the most part, I think we've kind of beaten the horse here in terms of depth and whether or not it should be concerned. I think we kind of both agree here. There are some places on this football team where depth is a major concern, and I think none bigger than center. Because you look at center right now, according to the media availabilities, to what people have been saying, those have been in practice. Tate Ratledge is Georgia's center right now if Jared Wilson goes down. We're talking about an all-SEC right guard moving to center. And Tate Ratledge spoke about this in the spring, talking about how, he gained a lot of respect for what Cedric Van Pran did when he had to go cross-train at center and learn how to snap the ball. Not only that, but then have to take on a, 330-pound nose tackle that wanted to run him over to go get the quarterback. So, behind Tate Ratledge, there really isn't that 4-star, 5-star protege that is going to be Georgia's center of the future. You think about it, go back to 2020, I think it's 2020. Cedric Van Pran was that talented true freshman center. I want to say, correct me if I'm wrong, Dan, I want to say him and Trey Hill were on the same team. Was him and Trey Hill? No, I think Cedric Van Pran came after Trey Hill. It was he was the year after Trey Hill at center, right?
Warren Erickson played center. Warren Erickson played center before SVP.
Okay. He took over from Warren. And
Warren
now
moved over to guard. So
yeah, that's it. But and you look at it, and actually it was yeah. So it was Lamont Gilliard for that 17 season. Then they went to Trey Hill for I think 2 seasons, and then Erickson, and then SVP, and now it's supposed to go from SVP to Wilson as that specialized center. I mean, I guess that's a position they're going to look for in this class in terms of, hey, we got to find a guy that we can trust, to go be ready in the event that Jared's gone. Another one I want to touch on injury notes here, Dan, because I think this is significant in terms of speaking of depth. Jordan Hall, we heard, had suffered a setback that was reported pretty much everywhere. Kirby explained it today. He had originally a stress fracture in his tibia. That he had gotten better, started running again, and it was when he was running again, Kirby said, that he felt some pain. I believe it was pain in his other tibia, and turns out he has a stress fracture in that tibia as well. So he had to go get an operation done on that. So that's a pretty, I won't call it major setback, but it seems like
little.
It ain't little. It seems like he's definitely out versus Clemson. Warren Brinson's banged up. I believe he should be back. I don't think they're very concerned about that. Chaz Chambliss was somebody that he mentioned today is a little bit banged up. I believe he said it was soft tissue with Chaz. And then Rob Robinson was the news one today. Has a toe injury today. We don't know exactly what the issue is with the toe, but obviously that is a little bit of a hit for Georgia's running back room because you got Branson Robinson healing and rehabbing from last year's knee injury behind Trevor Etienne. So, hey, for those freshmen, Chauncey Bowens, Dwight Phillip, they're getting more reps now. Nate Frazier, they are all getting more reps, having to become ready if they are needed for the upcoming season. Dan, let's transition. That wraps up kind of the Georgia segment, the as we call it, the main event for this show. Let's transition into kind of our blind draft, which really isn't blind draft because, well, it's blind for me in the sense that I don't know who Dan's going to pick on his teams. But I told Dan, with the 2028 U.S. Olympics coming up, the U.S. is playing host to it. They're going to introduce flag football into the Olympics. And my God, I hope the U.S.'s flag football team performs much better than the under-20 football team has when it comes to international competition. Dan, I want you to build your all-time 2028 7v7 offense for flag football. So, starting with, let's go hard first. First, let me ask for the makeup. Do you want 3 receivers and a running back, or are you just going to go 4 receivers?
4 wide receivers, no running backs, because you can't run the ball in flag football. But you told me on the phone this was of all time, right? This isn't just players this year. Okay, so I can go anywhere I want.
Anyone you want. I'm going to start quarterback.
All right, Dan Marino.
Hey, it's on brand. We got another Dan. We got a Dan on Dan's team. Receiver 1.
Randy Moss.
Randy. Yeah, I mean, this is a great start. Receiver 2.
Jerry Rice.
Receiver 3.
Calvin Johnson.
Yep. I don't disagree so far. Receiver 4.
All right. This is going to be tough. I think I'm going to go Terrell Owens. There's so many right answers. There are so many right answers. I think I think that's where I have to go. I do. I think that's where I have to go.
Tight end.
Gronk.
And then,
well, you know what? For flag football, that may not be the best decision because you can't hit anybody. Maybe Antonio Gates. I don't know. Maybe I made a mistake. I'm not sure.
And I guess tight end 2 is what we're doing here.
Oh, if we're gonna go 2 tight ends, then I'm gonna go Travis Kelce.
Okay. Yeah. All right. Well, that's Dan's offensive flag football team, and I'm gonna put it up here on the screen. One moment, please. Right here. There we go. All right. So I was waiting to see if Dan was going to leave off a guy like Calvin Johnson off this list because I was giving some crap. I think the only change I would make with it being flag football, I want somebody that has a little juice to him. And I know you have that in Randy already, but just to put in a current day guy, give me a burner like Tyreek Hill instead of Terrell Owens. Just like,
oh, that's a really good one.
Just a smaller body, but elite speed. And you already have an elite speed in Randy Moss, but just a different type of receiver, you know?
Yeah,
So,
that's a really good call. I mean, I love T.O., but I've already got 2 T.O.s on the team. So
yeah,
Tyreek Hill would be perfect. You're right.
That's my only change. I think people will debate quarterbacks, but me personally, I have no problem with Dan Marino. I think there's so many damn quarterbacks, you can pick whichever one you want.
If you look at all the quarterbacks in the history of the world, the best throwing quarterback of all time was Dan Marino. He never had a running game ever, right? And then I don't know, like of all the quarterbacks to throw the ball, Dan Marino just threw the ball. I mean, he had perfect placement through laser beams. He could throw the piss out of it. He could throw it 80 yards downfield. I mean, he had a monster arm. And I think the problem is a lot of people remember the old Dan Marino that couldn't move and was standing in the pocket. The young Dan Marino was so electric. Now, listen, I love Brett Favre. He's probably my all-time favorite quarterback. But part of what made Brett Favre great is that he was really tough, and that does not matter in flag football. Tom Brady was an absolute surgeon, not disrespecting Tom Brady. John Elway. John Elway would have been a good one. A lot of people could have picked John Elway. Actually, best arm talent, probably just arm talent, is Jeff George. But there's no way in hell I'm taking that asshole.
All right, just for fun.
Okay.
Let's go Georgia edition 70, just for fun, because for the heck of it. Let's see.
I'm gonna do UGA or NFL? NFL Georgia or Georgia?
Both, however you want to.
All right. Well, never mind. All right. So they had to have played at Georgia, and I'll just say, okay, yeah, that's fine. I can do this. This is easy. All right, Matt Stafford.
Oh, yep. I was gonna say we're gonna have disagreements here if you don't name your guy.
All right, Terrence Edwards. I mean, you can't not pick Terrence Edwards. I guess Malcolm Mitchell. You have to
tough,
go,
man.
George Pickens and AJ Green.
Okay. I like what you're doing here. Tight end, I don't even have to ask. We're just going to go ahead and put Brock Bowers on the list.
Yeah, of course.
And who's your second tight end? This could get interesting because there's some options here.
I mean, all right. There's a name that's sticking out my brain, but he didn't pan out. But Orson Charles should have been great, and so should have Isaac Nada. So I don't know, but like Orson Charles was supposed to be great. I don't know. I think in flag football he would have been incredible.
Let's do it.
I mean, Oscar. You could have went Oscar Delp too, but I just for shits and giggles I'm going to go Orson Charles because there's probably a large majority of our audience who don't know who that is.
The only change I'd make, and this is a stretch because I don't know who I'd take out. I don't know who I'd take out.
Take out Malcolm Mitchell, and you could probably add a different wide receiver, but I don't think people remember.
I don't necessarily disagree with Malcolm. I don't know who you take out. I'm going to give you the name and let you see who you think. Hines Ward. Where you put Hines Ward, or are you fine without Hines Ward?
Hines Ward was just good at everything. I mean, the guy's a Hall of Fame wide receiver in the NFL. You can't. I mean, so yes, you have to take out Malcolm Mitchell and put Hines Ward. That is a huge miss by me. That's incredibly bad.
Now
that's incredibly bad on my part. And then, if you Buck Bellew will die. He will die defending Lindsey Scott. He swears up and down. He said this to Terrence Edwards to his face, that the greatest wide receiver in Georgia history is Lindsey Scott.
Heck, if
I don't know if that's just because that's his guy.
he
Or
caught the hell of a touchdown. I'd stand for Lindsey Scott if he caught that touchdown for me. You know.
Mm. Hey,
Next
but
question.
you know what's really important to mention, right? Oh, never mind. Go ahead. Ask your question, and I'll
Yeah,
wrap up with it.
yeah. If we can play both sides of the ball, which he has to on an all time UGA 77 flag football team, Champ Bailey. I mean,
Of course.
Champ would be probably the most entertaining UGA flag football 7v7 athlete you can have up there.
Well, if we took defense, that first of all, I don't even want to play that game, Georgia's defense, because because like you're going to get murdered for who you leave off. I mean, you got first of all, Malachi Starks has been there for 8 minutes, and he's already probably on my team. But then you've got Thomas Davis, who's if I'm not mistaken, he made it to the Hall of Fame in the NFL, or if he's not, he's right there.
I think you're right.
And then you've got Greg Blue, which is a free safety. I mean, you got Champ Bailey. That defense would be absolutely freaking nasty. Nasty. Hey, let me ask you a question. Does Kamari Lassiter even get a mention on a defensive team? Because he's pretty damn good too, bro.
I love Kamari Lassiter. I'm trying to think of all the corners. I think a lot of people in the 80s would say Scott Warner has to be up there as a corner. Or maybe it was a safety. Ooh, I might be showing my age there. Man. See, it's interesting because I think Kamari got the love that I always thought Eric Stokes should get at Georgia.
Okay.
I thought Eric Stokes always got left out in terms of like national analysts. Never mentioned Eric Stokes. Kamari finally got that love coming into this draft class. I feel like.
I got a name for you. Paul Oliver.
I mean, you'd have to put him up. I
Okay,
think you probably have to put
Paul
him up there.
Oliver, rest in peace, Paul Oliver. But that man basically became famous for shutting out Calvin Johnson, which at the time was cool. But now that you look back at it and you realize how freaking good Calvin Johnson really was, to basically shut him down, even if it was one game. Damn, boy. Damn.
I mean, it's kind of like to translate it into like, and you're gonna, you won't hate this. Our boy Sauter and Jay will hate this. It's kind of like if Deion Sanders shut out Jerry Rice back in the day. You know,
he
Jerry
did.
Rice catch. You know,
there were games where he did.
Yeah,
there were games where Jerry won, and they went back and forth. That was actually, if you go back and look at it, Jerry Rice, almost every one of his freaking highlights is against the Atlanta Falcons. So take it for what it's worth.
Hey, that was a great edition of the Tough Talk podcast. I thought I really liked the 77 team. 77 was cool. Some we've never really done was a 77 team. I mean, yeah, Matt Stafford every day and twice on Sundays is my 7-on-7 quarterback. Dude is just I can't wait to see him play this year, Dan, because he played so damn well this past year. So damn well. It is amazing to see how he came back from a injury-riddled 2022 season and played some of the best football he has in the last few years, which is saying something because he won a damn Super Bowl just 2 years ago. Yeah, shout out Matthew Stafford. Shout out Dan Kiley. Dan, you said you had something to close the show.
Yes, I do. Listen, football is back. We are so excited that football is back. We are playing Clemson in, I think it's 2 weeks? Is it 2 weeks? Is that right?
Yeah, dude. It's 2 weeks, so we have football back.
But no, we have football this weekend. Okay, I'm wearing my Mill Creek stuff today because on Friday, we open up on the road at Lambert. And for the next, God knows how many ever months, I'm going to be obnoxious Mill Creek dad fan. And I just wanted to say go Hawks and wish my boys luck. Football is back on Friday nights. Friday Night Lights.
Corky Kell starts, I think, tomorrow? Is it tomorrow or Thursday?
I think Wednesday. Yeah, it starts on Wednesday. So there's a couple games on Wednesday. And so they eliminated a bunch of Gwinnett County teams from the Corky Kell because a lot of the other areas of the state were getting really upset that every year is nothing but Gwinnett County teams. So we are not participating in the Corky Kell for the first time in 10 years.
Dang, I did not know that. I know, obviously, Rome pulled out, sadly, after that accident with the bus. So prayers to those people in Rome. I'm glad to hear. Last I heard, everybody was okay. I mean, man, it always sucks to hear that. So, yeah, go support Dan Kiley at Dan Kiley3 over on Twitter. You can find me at Harrison Reno. We will be back next Tuesday with another edition of the Top Dog Talk podcast, folks. Underway.
Oh,
College or high school scrimmages. And now it's time for the games. It's time for the games to begin. Week 0 is, I believe, a week away. Georgia football's 2 weeks away. Week 0 is, I think, next week. So, hey, for the folks here at the Top Dog Talk podcast, Dan Colley over there. I always get this. And I'm right here. We'll see you next week.